connective tissue is made up of extracellular matrix and cells. The extracellular matrix consists of protein fibres and ground substance, which is the material found between the cells and the fibres. The fibres that make up part of the extracellular matrix are secreted by the connective tissue cells, and they account for many of the functional properties of the tissue. For example, the extracellular matrix of cartilage is flexible but firm, whereas the extracellular matrix of bone is hard and relatively inflexible. But going back to the very start, and all connective tissue arises from embryonic cells called mesenchyme. Mesenchyme is a collection of undifferentiated cells which give rise to most of the tissues of the body. In the case of connective tissue, mesenchyme gives rise to a series of immature cells which have a name ending in blast. So remembering from the terminology module that the suffix blast refers to an immature cell. So for our connective tissue proper cells, these are called fibroblasts. For cartilage, they are chondroblasts. And for bone, they are osteoblasts. These blast cells have capacity for cell division, so they can reproduce and replicate. And they secrete the extracellular matrix, including both the protein fibres and the ground substance. For most types of connective tissue, once the extracellular matrix has been produced, the immature cells differentiate into mature cells or develop into mature cells. Now we use the suffix "cyte." So we have fibrocytes, chondrocytes, and osteocytes, which are the mature connective tissue proper cells, cartilage cells, and bone cells, respectively. The mature cells have reduced capacity for cell division and the production of the extracellular matrix, and instead are mostly involved for the monitoring and maintenance of that extracellular matrix. So monitoring the fibres and that ground substance. So once fully developed, connective tissue is made up of three components: connective tissue cells, and the extracellular matrix, which is secreted by the connective tissue cells and includes both protein fibres and ground substance. In the various examples of connective tissue that I have up on the slide here, our connective tissue cells are these dark pink, these white, and these purple dots. Our fibres are these long lines that run through the tissues. And then in the space between those cells and those fibres will be the ground substance, which will be in various forms or states dependent on the type of connective tissue. So looking at each of those components in more detail, and first we have connective tissue cells, and the cells are the living, functioning part of the tissue. We have common connective tissue cells, which are common to most connective tissue types, and then specialised connective tissue cells, so things like chondrocytes, osteocytes, and red blood cells, which are only found in one particular type of connective tissue. So taking a look at the common connective tissue cells, and the most common connective tissue cell is our fibroblast. A fibroblast is a large flat cell with branching processes or branching arms that moves through the connective tissue, secreting protein fibres and ground substance. We have macrophages, which develop from monocytes, which are a type of white blood cell. Macrophages have quite an irregular shape with short branching processes or short branching arms, and they're capable of engulfing or eating bacteria and cellular debris via phagocytosis. Plasma cells are quite small cells that develop from another type of white blood cell called a B lymphocyte. Our plasma cells secrete antibodies, which are proteins that attack or neutralize foreign substances in the body. Mast cells are found alongside the blood vessels that supply the connective tissue. They produce histamine, which is a chemical that dilates small blood vessels and makes them more leaky, so it allows substances to move through them more easily. This response makes up part of the inflammatory response, so we release histamine when we have inflammation. Our adipocytes, also known as our fat cells, are a storage site for triglycerides or fat. And lastly, our leukocytes, which are also just known as white blood cells, are usually not found in high numbers in normal connective tissues. However, in response to certain conditions, they will migrate from the blood into our other connective tissue types. For example, neutrophils, which are a specific type of leukocyte or white blood cell, will gather at the site of an infection. Other types of white blood cells might migrate to the site of a parasitic invasion or an allergic response. So our leukocytes, again, play a role in our immune response. Moving on to the protein fibers, and there are 3 different types of protein fibers that are embedded in the extracellular matrix. These are collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. So regardless of the specific type of protein fiber, the function of these fibers is to strengthen and support the connective tissue. So collagen fibers are thick and strong fibers that resist pulling forces or tension, but they're not stiff, so they do give tissue some flexibility. Collagen fibers are often found in parallel bundles, so lots of collagen fibers kind of all packed in nice and neatly in a little row, and this only adds to their strength further. Collagen fibers are made up mostly of the protein collagen, which makes sense. And they're found in almost all connective tissue types, but particularly bone, cartilage, and tendons, which attach muscle to bone, and ligaments, which attach bone to bone. Elastic fibers are smaller in diameter than our collagen fibers, and they branch and join together to form a fibrous network within a connective tissue. An elastic fiber is made up primarily of the protein elastin, surrounded by a glycoprotein called fibrillin. Because of their unique molecular structure, elastic fibers are strong, but they can be stretched up to 150% of their relaxed length without breaking. Equally as important, elastic fibers have the ability to return to their original shape after being stretched. This is a property or a characteristic we call elasticity. And because of this property, elastic fibers are found in high concentration in the skin, in blood vessels, and in lung tissue, all structures which require the ability to expand and then recoil. Reticular fibers are thin branching fibers made up of collagen proteins arranged in quite fine bundles and also covered in a glycoprotein coat. They provide structural support to the walls of blood vessels and form a network around cells in tissues, including areolar tissue, adipose tissue, nerve fibers, and smooth muscle tissue. Like collagen fibers, reticular fibers provide support and strength. And reticular fibers make up the supporting framework of many of our soft organs, like the liver, the spleen, and our lymph nodes. So just to give you a bit of a visual as to what these fibers look like, these thick, dark pink lines here will be our collagen fibers, so thick, strong fibers. These squiggly branching fibers here will be our elastic fibers that can stretch and then recoil. And then these dark branching fibres forming that framework to particular organs are our reticular fibres. Lastly, our ground substance, which is the component of the connective tissue which sits in between the cells and the fibres. And the ground substance can be fluid, semi-fluid, gelatinous, which is like jelly, or hard and calcified, depending on the connective tissue type. Ground substance has a variety of functions, including the support of cells, binding cells together, the storage of nutrients like water, and also being the site of exchange of substances between the blood and the cells.